All right, what is going on, kids? It is Dr. Remy LeBeau, and I'm coming at you once again from the X-Lair to provide you my very deep and insightful thoughts into Zack Snyder's Justice League. Holy fucking shit. Like, can the world get any weirder? Pandemic, all sorts of fucking weird social strife that is ultimately going to lead to a better world, ideally, and all sorts of fucking craziness happening all over the world, and then all of a sudden this movie comes out that was supposed to come out like years ago, probably like in 2016, because the final version came out in 2017. So this is like probably like a 5-year-old movie at this point. A movie that Zack Snyder was making, and he had made Man of Steel. He had made Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which the studio forced him to cut down for the theatrical version, which was an inferior version to the actual version that he made, which is the, I think, the ultimate cut of that film. And even though I have some problems with that movie, like bringing in Doomsday for no reason, introducing Wonder Woman ancillarily, just trying to squeeze in a bunch of shit that didn't need to be in there. Like, overall, it's fine. It's enjoyable. It's a good movie. It's a fucking Zack Snyder movie. I mean, Zack Snyder, even though he is very surface level, ultimately he does achieve entertainment with his films. And like, you can take something like the Transformers movies, which are very similar in terms of surface level stuff, and then they wind up being shit. But Zack Snyder's films wind up being really good because there is more there. Like, there's a lot of thought that goes into all of it. Now, whether or not you like that train of thought is a whole other fucking issue. But bottom line is, the motherfucker thinks about everything he does, and he does it very well. Like, everything is very precisely done. Everything is very well thought out. Everything is like as good as it can be within the context of what he is trying to create from his perspective. And the perspective is there. It is signature Zack Snyder perspective. It is very good. It is something I enjoy, I will never say no to a Zack Snyder movie. And I fell in love with his stuff like back in Dawn of the Dead. Like, Dawn of the Dead came out. I didn't even know who fucking Zack Snyder was, but I know I love that fucking film. It was fantastic. Then 300 comes out. It's like, whoa, this is some next level shit. And then you have fucking Watchmen come out. Like, he fucking escalated his game there. Sucker Punch was not my bag, but it looked great. And of course, and then ultimately Man of Steel. They give him Superman, and you're like, okay, well, this is going to be something great. But then you also understand, okay, Superman is like a very particular thing in that it's had a very successful financial history, and therefore corporations are like very kind of like with their fingers, and they're trying to like reproduce that success, and as opposed to letting like artists create, and therefore maybe they produce that success on their own. And so the studios are always in there, and they were in there when Zack Snyder was trying to get his vision up and going. And it was clear that because Superman Returns, that Bryan Singer did, I think in 2006, with what's his name, that other guy, Brandon Routh, that wound up playing him again in that exact same role in the recent Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover on the CW. That movie was taken to not be Superman enough in terms of like the violence and like the ability of Superman to kick ass and shit. And I think that was always like kind of like the lingering criticism of that movie, and why ultimately it probably landed in the corporate level in their minds as being a failure because of the lack of that kind of like extreme kind of Superman violence. And I think when Zack Snyder was crafting his vision, everybody was like, we need violence. They didn't like that there wasn't violence last time, so we got to put violence in there. And on top of that, you had the Christopher Nolan trilogy, which is a very specific fucking vision for Batman, right? Very specific, very particular. And Christopher Nolan was very specific about that. He didn't want it to continue. He didn't want it to be a launching pad for a DCEU. Like, he just wanted it to be its own fucking thing. And that's why he didn't come back to do any more. That's why even Bale, I believe, turned down Justice League, because he didn't want, he felt that it needed to be honored for its own thing, right? The original Nolan trilogy. So they kind of like, that was like its own thing, but it was super successful. And so the money people are like, we need this. We need this. And it's like, well, this is a very Batman, Christopher Nolan-esque sort of way of doing things. Yeah, but we want to reproduce that success, so let's put it in Man of Steel. So they try to give it that Nolan, like Dark Knight trilogy, Nolan-esque sort of kind of prism by which the thing was created through, and so Zack Snyder was having to deal with that, having to deal with like the need for excessive violence, and then also wanting to tell like a very unique artistic story. And I think given all those circumstances, he made the best film he could. I think it's enjoyable. It's pretty fantastic. It's pretty fun to watch. Then we get Batman v Superman. We had that moment at San Diego Comic-Con where we see Batman in his armor from The Dark Knight Returns, the original Frank Miller graphic novel, or original series that became a graphic novel, where it's like, you know, Batman's old and he comes back and he has to fight, but he puts on this metal suit to fight Superman at one point because Superman's like a political puppet of like Reagan. So like we saw this image in San Diego Comic-Con. It harkened to that battle. We got the impression, okay, this is what they're doing. They're doing something very similar to that. Everybody's super fucking excited about it. We're all like, yeah, give it to us, give it to us, give it to us. And like waiting. Finally, Batman v Superman comes out and people are not excited about it because the stupid studio was like, we want to build a universe just like Marvel. Okay, that takes time. No, we want to do it right now. So they just start fucking pumping all this shit into a movie that doesn't need all this extra shit because they're trying to get on the Avengers level. And it's like, you got to work up to Avengers level, motherfuckers. But, you know, money, people, greed, you know, that always fucks with art. So Zack Snyder, once again, is like, okay, I'm trying to make a sequel to Man of Steel, but I also need to bring in Batman, Wonder Woman. I need to hint at this greater world of heroes. I need to do all this stuff. Oh, and they want me to do Death of Superman. Because, you know, that was the big sort of like popular Superman comic event that like drew people in that didn't read comics, and there were lines out the door and at comic book shops because it was all over the local news and the national news and people talking about Superman's dying, and it was just a gimmick. But in the end, like, it was popular, and so the money people are like, this is popular, do it over here. And so here's Zack Snyder, and he's got Man of Steel, did a good job with it, wants to do a sequel. They're like, no, we gotta do all this other stuff. And he's like, all right, fine. So he's like, Batman, all right, let's just do Batman versus Superman, that's good. That'll be like a Dark Knight Return. No, Wonder Woman, no, Doomsday. We gotta get Doomsday in there. And we got a hint at Flash, and we gotta get the Cyborg weird like moment in there. We gotta get the guy swimming, Aquaman. It's like, yes, stuff, more movies, more money. And Zack Snyder's like, all right, I'll do my fucking best here. I'll do my, and the guy did do his best, and then they cut it down by half an hour, and it looked like shit. So at least it seems like he did not do his best. But you watch the Ultimate Edition, like, he did his best. Like, here's all these corporate money people trying to force him into doing something that he probably did not want to do, and he did the best he could with it, and it turned out the best it could. And overall, it's a Zack Snyder film, and I enjoy it. You know, I enjoy it. Then that movie comes out. As the movie is about to come out, they are already filming Justice League, right? Everything in this Justice League Snyder cut that we finally saw in 2021 had already been shot, done, right? Batman v Superman comes out, another movie comes out, and because of the performance and the response of that movie, which is a result of the studio fucking up by forcing Zack Snyder to cut his movie down by half an hour and forcing all this other shit on top of that. But beyond that, like, they're the ones that cut the movie down to a level that makes it not seem like it makes great sense. So they blame him. They blame Zack Snyder. Everybody starts to blame Zack Snyder. This is Zack Snyder's fault. Zack Snyder. He's got a finished movie that's done shooting, right? Production is shot, but post-production is not done, right? Post-production is editing. Post-production is visual effects, audio mixing, etc., etc. So everything that needs to be shot is shot. There was a clear script. Everything was fucking shot, but then nothing was done with it. They just put a cut together. They showed it to the studios. They got their response from the audiences. They saw this cut and they're like, we gotta change stuff. All the while, Zack Snyder's having his own little fucking mini crisis at home, unfortunately. as tragic as it is, his daughter's going through like this crisis and ultimately winds up killing herself. So he has a daughter who commits suicide, and then he's like, well, I'm just going to step away from the project. And they're like, okay, well, now we're going to change it. Maybe they planned to change it before. That's where things get muddy. It's never been made clear exactly how all those circumstances sort of overlap and result in the outcome. But who cares? These are personal matters for Zack Snyder. We don't need to fucking know about his personal life. This is the most horrible thing that can happen to a person. He dealt with it. He went along with it, and he walked away from the movie, and they took the movie, and then they brought Joss Whedon in, and they're like, make it Avengers-y. So then he takes the movie, which I can now have a clear vision of what he does because I know what Zack Snyder intended to do. So Joss Whedon gets the movie, and it's clear they don't want the storyline from this movie to continue. So that's fucking clear from what the story that I saw in this movie versus the story that happened in the Justice League film. And that is one point I need to address, and I think that's a pretty big one. Because even though I really fucking liked the Snyder cut of Justice League, I really enjoyed it. It's another great Snyder DC film. Like, the things that it was promising, the things that it was saying are coming after this, I don't necessarily know if I want to see that. I mean, it would be cool to see it just to kind of finish his vision. But in terms of like, okay, is this the ideal Justice League kind of multiple film arc that I want to see? I don't know, because it's implied that like Darkseid's going to come, Lois is going to die, and he's going to take over the planet, and then he's going to rule with Lois. And I guess people are talking about things that rule with Superman, and people are talking about storyboards that Zack Snyder showed for the second and third film that sort of follows this path of like that happens, and then I think you move into like a future time period, which is that post-apocalyptic world that we see in Batman's vision, I guess, and then ultimately Flash has to fix everything, I think. And Zack Snyder said that that's supposed to be a trilogy, so then we would have a second film after this and then one more after that. It's a tough decision to make at a studio executive level to say, you know what, this is a big creative undertaking, and these are big fucking characters, and people are invested in this shit, people love this shit, and we're invested in this shit, and we love this shit. But we need to stop everything we're doing. We need to go a completely different direction. That is a very difficult thing to do. And I cannot 100% blame the studio for wanting to do that. Because if it is clear that what Zack Snyder is doing is not 100% the best course of action for these characters in general, and you have like all these characters, and ultimately this is going to be the foundation for everything that comes next. If everything is going to be tied to this, and it is not the optimal backbone to all of this, then if we stop it now and do something completely different, then we're going to have some years where there's going to be backlash. People are going to be pissed. But in the long run, we may be able to correct the course and give the people and these characters what everybody ultimately deserves to have. And so it's a tough thing because it's like, I like what Zack Snyder's done. I like his vision, but I also do think like, well, there are other stories that could be told here, and they don't have to be so dreary. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be like the worst possible outcome. I like the idea of doing like these apocalyptic stories, like what if type scenarios, like, but like a one and done type of thing, not like 5 movies that take the course of 10 years and like, you have all these other like offshoots of individual characters dealing with the same circumstances, all coming from this very dreary sort of backbone to the story. It's like, I mean, maybe it's just like pandemic mind or something that's like doesn't want me to be exposed to that as my only option, but like, I'm all for it, but it's like, is that really what the studio, what Warner Brothers, what DC, what they want their characters to be defined as for like a generation, you know? Like that's a pretty important question. Like, and I understand that like at the beginning of this, you're going into it, you have this great, like you have a director that basically everybody loves. Zack Snyder. Everybody fucking loves this guy. Like, you know, he's done Watchmen, he's done 300, people love what he's done. It's like, yeah, he's gonna make a great Man of Steel film, but we fucked with it, and it wasn't the best. It wasn't taken the best, right, by the public, and so then things start to sour, and then you give them another film, and then you think, okay, well, this should fix things. People seem to be excited about what we've previewed, and then they like, okay, fine, let's just greenlight the next chapter. They film the whole thing, and then the second chapter comes out. People don't love it. They're done filming the third chapter, and they're like, fuck, there's like another 4 or 5, and then there's these offshoots, and it's all going to be related to this. It's like, it's a tough decision, but like, I have to say that that I respect the balls it took to do that. I do respect the balls it took to do that, because what I saw here in the Zack Snyder film is a good film, and I would like to see more, you know, it would be fine to see more. But like, do I want to see like better stories, like with all of these characters together, like in more interesting ways that's not so dour and maybe they do face some horrible circumstances, but overall, like, there is a sense of joy associated with these things, because ultimately that is what has always been the case with these characters, right? Like a good sense of joy that is associated with them, that is what draws people to love them and to be in love with them for so many generations. So it's a tough one, because I really like what I saw, but then again, like, maybe we'll get some better shit, you know, like coming forward. And I love Zack Snyder, and like I would love to see another 2 parts to this. But if that's all the Justice League we're getting in like the next 10 years, I would prefer something else, you know? I mean, it's great. Like, this was fun. Everything about this movie was so much better than the cut that we saw. Okay, so let me get back to the story. So fucking Joss Whedon comes in, they give him this movie. They're basically like, we need you to stop these like storylines that are going further into Apocalypse and shit. So that he's like, okay, shit, I'm going to take out Darkseid, right? I'm going to take out Darkseid. I'm going to take out everything associated with Darkseid and like sort of the promise of Apocalypse and a war with Apocalypse and shit like that. So that cuts that off. And that's why we were left with Steppenwolf as the only villain, because they didn't want to go further with it, but they'd already shot everything with him as the villain. And so therefore they just allowed him to continue being the villain. There was implications of Darkseid existing, but beyond that, there was really nothing. And so I understand why they did that, given the point was to cut off the storyline so that we don't have to continue into it further, right? So they cut that out, but this is the thing. Okay, so decisions aside about what were made to cut and leave in versus not, the studio did fuck up in the end by forcing that Joss Whedon Frankenstein cut out, because there was some studio heads that their bonuses were dependent on the revenue gained from that movie coming out a particular year, and so they pushed the movie out. So a lot of the CGI looked like shit, and Steppenwolf looked like fucking shit. So you have your main fucking villain, and he looks like shit. He's not anyone that anybody cares about. He's not in any way a force to be reckoned with in terms of intimidation, in terms of gravitas, and he looks like shit. In this movie, he looked fucking great. Like, he looked like a cross between that fucking Steppenwolf in the original 2017 theatrical cut and like the Destroyer from Thor, and he had like personality. I don't know. I really liked the Steppenwolf. Like, I really enjoyed him. But like, they told him to cut out Darkseid. So you cut out all this great shit, right? All this great shit that we saw in this cut, where you see Darkseid, you see his motivations, you see his interests, you see the fact that when there was a fight on Earth, it was a fight that he lost, and then he left. What happened was the anti-life equation was left here. Okay, that makes more sense. That's why he really wants to fuck with the Earth. The box scissor here, that ultimately is like his greatest weapon. He hasn't had it for a very long time. That makes a lot of sense. And then at the very end, we see this like that portal open up, and we see Darkson, we see Granny Goodness and Desaad, and they're like ready to come into the world. And there's like this looming threat, which is bigger than Steppenwolf, which makes the stakes so much bigger in the film, because you know that he is just sort of a harbinger of something much bigger. And so therefore the stakes are there more than just like there's this weird spiky head guy we need to bring down, you know, whatever. He has mother boxes or something. I don't know. So they take out all this stuff from Apocalypse, which fucking sucks because it really takes out a lot of the stakes in the film. And by the way, it made a huge fucking difference in the Snyder Cut. Everything made so much more sense. Like everything was balanced, everything was smooth. Like there was a reason for everything. Like everything worked together in like this unified whole, making everything make sense. It wasn't just a series of like big scenes strung together with a couple of like funny, quippy dialogue scenes in the middle to kind of string it all together. There was like actual reasons for the characters doing things. Like I was interested in what was happening to the individuals and why things were happening. It was very much a movie, like an actual movie. Like you don't take a completed movie and then give it to someone else and say, make it something else. Like you don't do that. And that's why no matter what the fuck's come out about Joss Whedon, I am not happy about hearing about a lot of stuff I'm hearing, and I'm really disappointed because I've been a big Joss Whedon fan my entire life. Buffy is a big deal for me. I've started rewatching Buffy recently. Like, it's been years, and I'm starting to rewatch it and enjoy it again after seeing it probably 5 or 10 times throughout my life prior to that in my earlier years. Like, I love that shit, and I love Joss Whedon, and like to hear about some of the things that were going on even back then, and like maybe and like stuff going on during the reshoots of Justice League. It does really break my heart, and ultimately does sour me on him as a person, but not his art, because he's not a monster like Woody Allen, who, if you see that Woody and Mia thing, he's a monster. He's a monster, though, in his own way, but he's not that level of monster to the point where it negates all of the art that all these other people were involved in, you know? In terms of Woody Allen, like, his stories were his own stories. So everything reflected who he was. So all his movies, despite all these people being involved, are really about him. And he's a fucked up motherfucker. And I don't want to watch his movies. And I don't want to fucking know about him. I want to forget about him. But with Joss Whedon, I can forget about the guy. But his work can stand alone because he's a fucking asshole, clearly. And he's got a lot of problems. But his work is a result of more than just him, especially because also it was television series and a lot of people were involved. And even with the Avengers, like Kevin Feige has a big hand in a lot of that stuff, and so does Jon Favreau, and so does everybody else. So that's that. But nonetheless, like you know, like all that shit aside, like Joss Whedon is not this movie. Like the theatrical cut of Justice League is not Joss Whedon's fault. Joss Whedon did the best he fucking could. They gave him a finished movie that was very long, but very well thought out and made a lot of sense. And they're like, here, make it into something else. And we just kind of needed to make enough sense. And that was enough for them. And so he fucking chopped it up, tried to make it quippy, left all the main, now it's clear, like he left all the main sort of like big action sequences in. But like a lot of the meat of the film was cut out. So like a lot of what's important about it was cut out. Everything with Ray Fisher, everything with Cyborg was cut out. I mean, that's clearly like the heart of the film. That is the backbone of the film. And they just like ripped that out. And then all you had was just like, heroes fighting, get to beat each other, sort of. Fight, fight, fight. Boop, boop, boop. Beep, beep, beep. Pixels, pixels. You know, it's just like, what? What? Like this? You're okay with this? You should have just fucking done this thing with Zack Snyder. You could have cut half an hour out of this movie, released a 3.5-hour version of this. People would have been happy with it. People would have been happy with it. And then from that point forward, you could have decided what you wanted to do with the story. You could have people come in and rewrite sequels. It doesn't have to go the way Zack Snyder wanted it to. That's another option that could have been explored. You know? Take the story from where it's at now, see where Zack Snyder wants it to go, and maybe take it there, but don't take it there as like this great fucking arc. Just fucking take it there and then bring it back. But don't take a movie that's already finished and try to make it into something else, because if you do that, you're going to get what happened, and then people are going to turn sour on one of the most lucrative franchises that exists in the fucking world. The DC franchise. All these characters, all these stories. Like, you don't want to fuck with that. Clearly, Marvel knows what they're doing. They're very good stewards of the stories, the Marvel stories. And so they respect them. They treat them well. They put the right of resources into them. And we get great products as a result. I mean, that's just how it works. So here, like, in terms of Warner Brothers, like, they fucked up royally. And, like, again, like, it was all a very complicated, tough position. But I know that ultimately it has everything to do with corporate greed. It has everything to do with corporate greed, because corporate greed is always at the top of these things, and they always have too much control. But with Kevin Feige is a corporate guy, but he's a nerd, and he started a nerd, and he started a fan, and he started his way up the production process, and eventually he learned everything, and then finally he was given this corporate power. But he was also the guy that's like, I want to see the best version of these things possible, because that matters. And so therefore it matters all the time, and therefore the corporate people are like, he knows what he's fucking doing, leave him the fuck alone. But there's nobody like that at DC. Even to this day, there's nobody like that at DC. They keep saying that there are people. At one point it was going to be Jeff Johns. At one point it was going to be Jeff Johns, who's, you know, one of the main creators over at DC Comics. They kind of gave him a lot of power with this stuff, but it's like, but he doesn't have the production background. Like he's not a filmmaker, you know, like he's not involved in filmmaking. Like he doesn't have that background. He's a smart guy, clearly. It turns out he might be an asshole too, based on what some people are saying, including Ray Fisher. But nonetheless, he's not a Kevin Feige. Like clearly that he was not the guy, and I don't know if they will find a guy. I don't know. Maybe James Wan can be that guy. I did enjoy Aquaman. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. Anyway, whatever. So Joss Whedon takes the movie, rips the heart out of it. Now, Ray Fisher, of course, has said that there was a conversation that he wasn't involved in that involved Jeff Johns, and had said something about taking out the black guy or something. I forget what it was, but I know that race was mentioned, and therefore there was likely some racially unjust motivations behind some of the decisions made behind the film. That's a possibility. I know that, and I'd say that's a big possibility from you know, just the standpoint of just like, yeah, very likely. But like in terms of the production process, you have this movie, it's given to Joss Whedon. They're like, it has to be 2 hours. They told him straight up, has to be 2 hours. That's the running length they want. Okay, so that he's tied up to that. So he looks at the whole movie. He looks at Ray Fisher, who's not a star, right? He was picked out from like Broadway sort of notoriety by Zack Snyder's casting people to be brought into the film, right? So this is his first sort of starring role. He doesn't have a lot of clout. He picks up that people in Hollywood are racist, and he's right about that. I don't know who's racist. I don't know how much they're racist, but there is racism in Hollywood. Like, just look at the fucking movies being made. Look at the behind-the-scenes stuff. Like, mostly white people, right? So, I mean, clearly there's been racism in Hollywood for a very long time. Things appear to be changing. Who knows? Whatever. That complicated issues. But clearly he picks up on that shit, and then all of a sudden his storyline is ripped out of the movie. Now, he says that all people of color were taken out. Well, the people of color are him and his family but Iris West was taken out as well. And I guess I could talk about it in a second. But she was just in there for a second. She didn't even have a line really. But she is a person of color. She was taken out, but maybe that scene wasn't necessary. But nonetheless, so he was taken out. His mother was taken out. I mean, a lot of his stuff was taken out. And like, there is clearly a pattern of people of color being taken out of this movie, without a doubt. Now, whether or not that was conscious or unconscious by Joss Whedon, I have no idea. Ray Fisher says that he heard some stuff. People have heard some stuff. I don't know if Joss Whedon was involved in those conversations or not. I have no idea. This is a complicated matter. Who knows? Maybe it's true that it was completely race motivated. I have no fucking idea. But in terms of like the movie itself and what the task was at hand, I'm just observing it from that perspective. And from that perspective, you have a movie given to a dude, and they're like, take 2 hours out of this movie, and he's like, what the fuck can I take out of this movie? There's so much in it. Okay, I'll take out all the stuff that didn't cost all sorts of millions of dollars to create action and is like super fun to watch. And I'll throw in a bunch of quippy stuff. All the stuff with Ray Fisher is great, but like that's a whole fucking storyline. And maybe Joss Whedon was like, well, that's the thing we can sacrifice, and maybe that was a mistake. And maybe it wasn't, and maybe it was race motivated, maybe it wasn't, I don't know. But clearly that was a mistake in terms of the overall storytelling of the movie. Because the movie lost its backbone, it lost its heart. And as a result of that, it wound up being like just very surface level. Now, when I watched that movie and I reviewed it in 2017, like I enjoyed it because it was the first time I was finally seeing these characters together, and it was just a joy. You know, it was just enjoyable because it was full of joy because I love these fucking characters, and I love seeing them together for the first time on the big screen in a huge theater. It was really fun, you know? And all this stuff, despite the story being shit, like was fun to watch, you know? And ultimately a lot of it looked terrible. A lot of the CGI was terrible. Steppenwolf was shit. There was really nothing that was really important, that felt important throughout it. But nonetheless, it was fun to watch. But there was an actual movie that was made, and the Snyder Cut is that movie that was made. Zack Snyder. So he had a vision. Joss Whedon had to chop it up. Joss Whedon chopped it up. He added some things here and there that were not great. Clearly now, we can see like what was put in, what was taken out. I have not seen that 2017 cut in a couple of years, but just from seeing this movie, I just remember there being certain aspects, sort of ins and outs that were added, some like kind of flair that it just felt very, or like I remember that it was that moment where they're fighting Superman when he comes back, and then Batman like is like thrown back, and he like makes a joke about how uncomfortable he is or something, and it just all felt very kind of weird and gimmicky and like out of place, you know. So all that bullshit's not there gratefully. And we get an actual movie, and I like Diana in this better than I've liked her, I think, in any other film, because she's just like a badass warrior, and they're not trying to make her like make jokes and shit that she can't make because she just doesn't have that fucking comedic kind of timing and quality. I like the Barry Allen stuff more. I saw more of what the Flash is and what he could become. Clearly we saw a really cool moment towards the end where he actually turns back time because they are actually too late in stopping Steppenwolf. And Darkseid comes to Earth and like fucking destroys everybody. I mean, and then we see Barry fucking do his thing, and I love the way it was represented. It was a little too CGI'd, I'd say. But I did like the idea of like as he's running and sort of in this Speed Force-y type of dimensional sort of warp space, that you see that sort of like universe behind him, like this. It's more of like it's less of a person being in like three-dimensional reality and kind of entering a multi-dimensional space that doesn't follow the same rules that normal three-dimensional space does. So I do like that, and that actually promises something for this forthcoming Flash movie, where he is going to be, I think, doing a Flashpoint type of scenario, and we're going to see like Michael Keaton's Batman. I believe we're going to see Ben Affleck's Batman as well in that, and we're supposed to see a new Supergirl in that. So it kind of promises something good to come. There was also a mention about like a multiverse, like multiple parallel timelines in this, which could ultimately wind up making this canonical. If the Flash film somehow like hints at things that happened in the Snyder Cut and then says that Flashpoint sort of fixes those things, then this film could ultimately simply just be considered canon. I hope they do that, because the theatrical cut doesn't need to be canon. like, this should be canon. Like, this is what was intended. This told the better story. Apparently, Ava DuVernay is working on a New Gods film. She's been working on it for a very long time, supposedly. I believe Grant Morrison jumped on to help write. I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I am mistaken. Somebody did. Somebody jumped in to help her. It might be even Scott Snyder. Maybe not. I don't know. I know it was some DC person, some big DC writer that is supposed to be working with her. We haven't heard anything about it, but we did hear about it being announced at one point. So I'm hoping that's still in the pipeline, and that the elements from this film are developed, but in a less Snyder-verse kind of stylistic approach. I think the Apocalypse, like, if you think about the Jack Kirby sort of flair, I think Marvel does a better job of sort of evoking the Jack Kirby of it all, the Jack Kirbiness of it all, than DC does, at least with the Snyder type of representation. And so therefore, I think that I would like to see Apocalypse depicted and the characters within it in a little bit more of like a kind of like a colorful sort of way, just to kind of evoke that Jack Kirby, because Jack Kirby created all this shit. He created Apocalypse and the New Gods and all this shit, and then I believe DC ultimately wound up, and I think that was created separately, and then I think DC, but then I think DC kind of merged that mythology into the main DC universe, I believe. I don't know. I'm not as much of I'm not as knowledgeable about the DC sort of comics evolution of the stories as I am with Marvel. But yeah, that's so hopefully that happens and things come out differently there. I'm so glad the shirtless Superman coming back scene was always Zack Snyder's thing, because it's in here and it's full blown, and Henry Cavill is looking beautiful. My goodness, Henry Cavill. My goodness. I feel like everybody was given like their fair share of time. Even Aquaman, this is like more of a prequel to his movie now. I liked everything with Cyborg. Ray Fisher was great. In the other movie, he was just like this weird kind of like robot character. In this movie, he's an actual fucking person. He has a past and a family, and like I care about him, and like everything he does has meaning, and everything means something, and it all works very well. The characters are getting to know each other. It's not just Ray Fisher and Flash digging up Superman. Wonder Woman and Aquaman are there too. That makes more sense. People are just kind of involved in this thing that's very kind of pseudo-traumatic, and everybody's kind of there, not because they need to be there, but because it's just like this thing, like they're digging up an old friend of Diana's, just like it's a thing, it's not just like a moment. It's just like it means something. Everything means something. So I like the whole Superman coming back bit. I like the time it took. I like the time that he spent with Lois and his mom. It felt different. It felt better. I like the fight at the monument better. It felt better as well. Like it felt more right, because clearly things were done in the Joss Whedon cut to kind of make it a little bit less, like, take the edge off of it, and like, no, fuck that, leave that in, like, let this play out the way Zack Snyder envisioned. Everything is very well thought out. Everything, like, it's very much a Zack Snyder film where it's like there's a vision, it's executed, it's unique, it's cool to look at, and it's like I'm so glad that I finally know now that like I can watch this film and not sort of have a mistrust for what I'm seeing, and sort of the kind of the rhythm of it, because clearly the rhythm was fucked up in the Justice League theatrical version, because it's two different visions. In fact, it's probably 80 different visions, but two distinct artistic visions are like fighting for dominance within the film, and it's like, and it's ultimately jarring and doesn't make it an enjoyable rewatch, which is why I haven't gone back to it really. I think I've watched it one time. I'm gonna watch this a lot more, because now this makes this makes Zack Snyder's films like better. Like it makes, I was going to watch Man of Steel and then Batman v Superman, but then I was like, fuck it, I'll just watch the Justice League 4-hour cut, because if this sucks, I don't want to waste my whole fucking day with this shit. And so I didn't do that, and I just watched the film, and I wound up enjoying it quite a bit. I thought it was really enjoyable. and I thought they did a great job overall. And I'm so happy for Zack Snyder that, you know, having had this film taken from him, it's just such a dark time in his life, and to have so many people want the vision to be realized, and for the circumstances, for the stars to align to actually allow it to happen, it's just so wonderful. And he gets that moment. I think at the end of the movie, I started clapping. I was just thinking about Zack Snyder. I was like, congratulations, dude. Like, you got to have this, and we get to now have it as well, but you get to have it. And maybe it puts a slight Band-Aid on that terrible wound that you have about that time period in your family and etc. But it's like, at the very least, you get to have this, and that's better than nothing. And I think I'm really happy for him. I'm happy for us that we get to see something. Had this movie come out, would it have done? Had this movie come out, would it have done? Would it have done well? I think it would have done better than Batman v Superman if they allowed it to be like 3.5 hours. And then I think people would have been down for more, but I think there definitely would have been a, Jesus, this is fucking dark shit sort of vibe to the whole sort of response to what the film was setting up. But you know what? Like, I mean, it still would have worked. It's just a question of where do we go from here? You know, does the DC universe ultimately wind up resulting in better things? We'll see. There's apparently a David Ayer cut of the Suicide Squad, and the Suicide Squad, I don't know if you guys know this, but that was taken from David Ayer. And then after Guardians of the Galaxy came out, they cut a trailer by some trailer house that did like an enjoyable, fun trailer that sort of evoked Guardians of the Galaxy, kind of introducing characters with fun music and shit. And then the studios freaked out. This was around that time of everything going on with Justice League and Batman v Superman. And so then they took the movie from David Ayer and they gave it to that trailer house to cut it. And so they tried to make it into like this fun poppy thing. And it's like, that wasn't the vision that David Ayer had. And his vision was probably much better than what we wound up seeing. So there's apparently a David Ayer cut somewhere. But in the end, with the Enchantress, if the Enchantress is in there, it's still not going to be a great film. But maybe it's a better film. I mean, what am I saying? It is a better film. There's a better film that exists of Suicide Squad out in the world. Maybe they'll release it. Maybe they won't. We'll see how Snyder Cut does. Who knows? The other stuff that stands out for me, I love the black suit Superman. I thought that was fucking great. I love seeing it towards the end. I love seeing his fight versus Steppenwolf. I love seeing how badass Wonder Woman was in this. She was fucking badass. That opening scene with her was less silly. It felt less silly for some reason, and it felt better. I'm glad they took out that opening scene with Batman. I'm glad there was still stuff in like that moment where Gordon is talking to Batman, Cyborg, Wonder Woman, and Flash for the first time, and then everybody leaves but Flash, and then Flash is like, oh, so they just leave like that? Well, that's rude. And then he leaves. That's a great fucking joke, and I always thought that was a Joss Whedon joke, but clearly it wasn't, and that's fantastic. I'm glad that a lot of the good shit from the original cut is still in this, because this is ultimately what the good movie was, not what everybody else did to it, because what everybody else did to it was just a bunch of corporate fucking idiots forcing artistic people to do things they probably didn't want to do, but giving them all sorts of money to do it, and then it ultimately leading to the worst case possible. And in the process, Ray Fisher was treated like shit, and maybe other people as well, and that ultimately soured people to Joss Whedon, and maybe ultimately to John, other people involved potentially. Walter Hamada, Ray Fisher keeps calling out. Walter Hamada is the head of Warner Brothers right now. Ray Fisher keeps calling him out, saying that he tried to obstruct the investigation into what happened with him and Joss Whedon, etc., and how he was treated. And so there's all sorts of trouble at the top. All of this could have been avoided had the studio simply moved forward. But in the end, it took balls for them to say, we need to change course. And if we don't do it now, we may never be able to do it. And we may simply be heading down a failed path. Again, there was always the option of write a better sequel to this than they planned. There was always that option, rather than take a movie that's already made and try to make it into something else. the better option is to make a better movie moving forward. People will like this movie. They would have liked it more than they like Batman v Superman. They had just seen Wonder Woman. They would have enjoyed Wonder Woman in this. They would have seen Aquaman after this. Like, there would have been opportunities to change course. I think ultimately it was a bad decision. It was a bad decision to take this movie away from Zack Snyder. It should never have happened. But I'm so glad we got to finally see it in its full form, what it was meant to be. It's very enjoyable. It's very much a poetic sort of exploration of this story. I like that it's in chapters. I like it didn't feel long, you know. It felt kind of short, to be honest, because I was like, because, you know, you're familiar with the main beats of the story, and so therefore you're sort of familiar with what's happening, but you're also not. You're also kind of like at the edge of your seat, like wondering what's going to happen. And so I kind of almost wanted more, but in the end we did get that epilogue as well, which I thought was very cool. And we saw that Deathstroke was actually in there as well more. He was in like the nightmare scenario. That might have been a reshoot, which is pretty cool. I like the Joker moment with Batman. That was pretty cool. We never got a Batman Joker moment in this universe. And just like the interaction of the characters, seeing them together, like those moments at the end where they're all getting on that troop carrier, that was pretty cool. Martian Manhunter pops up at the very end, towards the beginning, so we get more there. I like that the Hall of Justice was being set up. It wasn't just a Joss Whedon thing. I thought it would have been. It wasn't. I like that there was stuff being set up with Lex Luthor. There was a lot I liked a lot about it, man. It's really disappointing, to be honest, what could have been. But, I mean, we just have to kind of move forward at this point, because that's all we can do, just move forward, right? I mean, shit happens in the world, and you just move forward, because that's all you can do. It's the best thing to do. So that's what we'll do. We'll move forward, and we get to watch Zack Snyder's Justice League. Zack Snyder's Justice League. We get to watch Zack Snyder's Justice League, and whenever we fucking want on HBO Max. Hopefully they release a Blu-ray. I would love that, because I would prefer to watch things on Blu-ray, because I don't have to deal with internet connections and frames being dropped every now and then, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, super happy with this film, super happy with the Snyder Cut, super happy for Zack Snyder, super happy in general. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope the pandemic isn't taking you down. I already got my vaccination. I got the Johnson & Johnson one. So I'm all vaxxed up. No alien DNA traits yet, but we'll see what happens moving forward. All right, everybody. I hope everybody does well moving forward. Have a good time. Have a good week. Actually, I might drop a video maybe in the next couple of days for the first episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, if I feel it is worth talking about, meaning that we get enough information that's worth reflecting on. Because, you know, first episode, we may not get enough, and therefore I may not do anything. That's why I never talked about WandaVision at the beginning, because I was just like, well, they're clearly setting things up. There's no point in just endlessly speculating about things I have no idea about. And then, you know, cut to the internet doing exactly that endlessly. Anyway, I hope everybody's doing well. And as always, I want to remind you that if you have not already, I suggest you put an X in that box, ladies and gentlemen, because ain't nobody checking me. Take care. Bye-bye.